real estate broker here with Keller Williams Edge Realty in Burlington. My specialty is working with older adults and later in life moves. And for me, it's really, the real estate transaction is really only a very small piece of the work that I do. It's really recognizing that anyone who's making a later in life move is going through a life transition. And it's a transition that's really important. It's understanding and recognizing that it's a big change in our lives at that move of that nature. And to be able to call in the resources and the specialists and the help and support that's needed along the way. So I'd also like to introduce you today to our educational partners. They're sitting across the back and also Neela here. These partners are really what helps us to bring this presentation to you. If you haven't had a chance already to meet them, please do take some time at the end of the session. I promise you, nobody's going to bite. No one's going to try and sell you anything. But the information and the services that they provide are invaluable. So just in terms of introductions across the back, we have sorry, I lost my. Yeah, she's with Home 360 Home Transition, just changed her name. She's really someone that helps to prepare your home and to get organized and declutter and pack and move and all kinds of great things to help you along the way. Next to her is Denise LeBlanc, Denise Arbor Memorial. She helps to plan, prepare for the inevitable that we will all face one day. Next to her we have Angela Kelly. Angela is with Estates of Niagara. Estates of Niagara is a new, relatively newish company. They have some innovative housing models that they're building up in the Niagara Way, one in St. Catharines, one in Niagara Falls. Worth looking into because it's very different and a very unique model. Next to her we have Sarah Sunix, Smith's Funeral Homes. Also one of those situations that people avoid, but it's really important to plan ahead and get the information that you need so that you and your family are prepared. Unfortunately, we have Jerry at Sia. He just let me know that he's not able to get here. Jerry is with Quality Care Burlington. It's a home care company. And he's currently today putting out some fires. I guess he's got some clients that need some help right away. And then we also have Paul Cuttajar with Senior Care Access. Senior Care Access is a company that helps guide seniors through all different kinds of stages. They can help with anyone who's going to hospital and they need someone to be an advocate for them. If you're moving, they can help you find the right place. They can help you sort out any of these issues that may arise. Kind of a jack of all trades, and they've got the resources for all those types of services. And then we also have Neela White. Neela is with Blue Wing Group, Raymond James, and I'll just fill you in a little bit more about what she does in a few minutes. So we'll get started today with today's session. Now that's what's brought you here. The silent worry and being financially prepared for aging. So one of the biggest fears I hear about most often is, am I going to outlive my money? And of course, for me, in terms of real estate, it's always a big factor as to where someone's next home may be, how much they can afford, and what their needs are. And so today, to bring some clarity to the subject of finances, we have Neela White, and she's right now answering the door, and she'll be with us in a minute. And when we were preparing for this session, Neela sent me this statement. It says, in Canada, more than 600 people a day turn 65, and almost half of these people will require long-term care. Most of us have nothing saved for that care or even health crisis, and this is the big silent worry. Your plan for affording care really shouldn't be, I hope I just got my sleep. So the good news is that today Neela will help take away some of that fear and suggest the next steps to ensure that we're just not putting our heads in the sand and hoping that we die in our sleep. We all still have an awful lot of living to do. So before I get on and tell you a little bit more about Neela, I just want to note you do have notepads on your chair and you have some other information and a pen. So use those to jot down any questions that you have along the way today. You're welcome to ask them as we go or keep them to the end, and we'll just have a little bit further discussion. So, Neela is an incredible woman. She advocates for the open discussion and preparation for life-changing illnesses and their burdens, both financially and emotionally, to better equip and protect families against any long-term care costs. Her relatable style inspires families to examine their financial plan and empowers them towards a fresh conversation about viable options. Neela presents an empathetic approach when assisting clients with their families and draws on her first-hand experience from having her first career in long-term care and from being a caregiver to her parents for more than a decade in her life. Neela is a partner and co-founder of Blue Wing Advisory Group, Raymond James Limited. She has more than 25 years working in financial industry, providing insight and inclusive wealth management services for a variety of clients as both an aging specialist and senior portfolio manager. So listen to this. She's a graduate from the University of Western Ontario with a degree of psychology, from McMaster University with a degree in gerontology and a certificate in thanatology. Does anybody know what thanatology means? Sarah, I had to look it up too. It's a study of death and dying. In addition, she's a certified professional consultant on aging, an elder planning counselor, a certified executive advisor, senior portfolio manager with a twist. She's completed her patient navigation certificate at York University, death doula training through home hospice, and a certified dementia care provider. Currently, she's working on a book for caregivers and recipients. You need some chairs? Actually, you know what?
There's two.
You can use this. You can have,
I think that first one is available. Is that right at the very front?
that's okay. I'm glad that you're here. Okay. You can have a seat there and we'll get it settled. So as an active speaker on the subject of caregiving, the cost of aging, healthcare navigation, and the sandwich generation, Neela often participates in conferences, interviews, podcasts, and educational events. Most recently, the Ivy Professional Leadership Program. She's also been featured in industry publications such as Wealth Professional and the Advantage Investor podcast, and is an active member and presenter for the Canadian Securities Institute Financial Health for Seniors Initiative. So we're in good hands here today, I can assure you that. So today what we'll be covering, what options are available for housing, retirement home, aging in place, how to start difficult conversations with our families, how to maintain control over the decisions, what longevity planning is, and what components should be included, what matters in planning financially for aging, why you need to be prepared, and the benefits of having and sharing your plan. So, well, help me welcome Neela.
Thank you for that introduction, Marion. The one thing I'd like to comment on, all of those designations, that's what happens when you try to get into med school and you don't get in. You do everything else to try to get a DR as commissioner. So thank you all for having me today, and it's great to see such a full room, especially with the great weather outside right now. So as Marion said, I'm going to talk to you about aging and what I see as our concerns within our practice that clients and their adult children come to us with their parents are aging, or they're trying to create a retirement plan or an aging plan for themselves. Obviously, we're all aware of what's been happening in the stock market. Today, just before I left to come here, interest rates have raised by a quarter point, so the overnight lending rate right now is 5%. So what does that mean for debt? What does that mean for mortgages? What does that mean for lines of credit? But on a positive note, what does that mean for any interest-bearing investment that you have? We're finally seeing the risk-free rate is 5% compared to being in the stock market or mutual funds where we're seeing a 5% return but with a lot of volatility. So with that, I'll start off of two case studies that turned my focus around. And it started about 12 years ago. So I do have a background in aging, and my first career was in long-term care. I worked in a nursing home, and I lasted for about 3.5 years. And it was an environment that was very difficult, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have all this education behind me, what do I do with myself now? I was good with numbers, I was good with investing, so I became an investment advisor. 12 years ago, so I've been in the industry just over 25 years now. About 12 years ago, I had my first real case of tragedy, expensive tragedy. There was a client, he was a retired doctor. At the age of 87, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The life expectancy usually with pancreatic cancer is about 3 months. Well, at the same time, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which is a form of dementia. What that does is the cells become a bit rigid. It slows down the growth of the cancer cells. So indeed, he actually lived for 18 months. In that time, the cost to take care of him in place was $176,000. Because at that time with CCAC, he was living in home with his family. They assessed him as not needing and not being as urgent care because he was living at home. So to bring in the care that he needed, and because he needed a lot of care because he was quite frail, by the time he died, 18 months later, the cost that was borne to the family was $176,000. These are a bit of extreme cases, but I think what I'd like to point out, these are real cases that we deal with within our practice. These are real numbers, and I think it's part of the conversations we need to have with our families, between ourselves as a couplehood, with our friends, and whoever's part of our aging plan. What is it that we want as we age? How do we want anyone who's going to be part of our support to deal with crisis, and what does the crisis cost? Next slide. The second case was probably about 8 years ago. I had a client, she was a widow, she was a 5-time cancer survivor. So probability suggested that she should have died of cancer, and that's what she was prepared for, that if she was diagnosed with cancer again, she chose that this time she would not get treatment because the treatment that she had had with previous cancers was extremely, extremely invasive, and she made that decision. However, what happened was, at 78, she had an extremely mild heart attack, no issue with heart disease. Very, very mild heart attack. She fell going up the stairs, she fell headfirst into a wall, and she broke her neck. She was rushed to the hospital where she was diagnosed with permanent disability. The prognosis at that point was that even with disability, with bringing services inside the home or within a facility, that she would have about 10 to 12 years to live. About 4.5 years into the disability she had contractures, so the arms didn't move, and weakness on one side. She was diagnosed with rapid onset dementia, and she was given 3 months to live. 3 months to the day of diagnosis, she did die. So in total, from time of accident to the end, she lived for 5 years. And that came at a cost of just under $500,000. So what had happened with this case was she was admitted to hospital. She was in hospital for 3 months in rehabilitation. Then she was in another rehab unit for another 3 months, and she was discharged home to the family's home. On discharge, what usually happens within a hospital setting is that there's a discharge planning meeting where all professionals that have dealt with the patient, with the client, comment on what services are going to be needed to have the best life possible as independently and safely as possible. This client was recommended for 8 to 12 hours of care a day at home because she was disabled. She needed assistance with everything. When she was discharged home in CCAC, which was the old LIN, which is now HHAC, I believe, they ended up saying to her, well, because you're living at home with family in the home, we're not going to give you 8 to 10 hours to 12 hours a day. We're going to give you 3 hours a week.
Oh my.
So that was a big shock to the family, but you're at the point of there's discharge already from the hospital. She wouldn't be considered crisis because she was in the home already. That private care had to be brought in. Next slide. So this was the math from 2019. These were care per hour rates, from 2019. So it's about 10 hours a day. The family was able to negotiate about $30 an hour for care from a private PSW firm. The holiday rate at that point was $45. So the total came up to about $111,000 for care a year. Then there was an overnight rate if somebody had to come and stay to make sure that she was safe overnight. And physiotherapy once OHIP, which gave 8 sessions. Once OHIP completed the 8 sessions, that was it. So private physiotherapy was brought in, and that was about $100 an hour. So as we can see, when we're talking to clients, and again, this is a very extreme case, when you look at the cost just on its own, these are the costs that people have to be aware of. If you say that you want control over the decision making and you've had the conversation with your family, with your adult children, where does your budget lie for care? And we all know, because we've been hearing it on the news, that there is an issue right now in Ontario with care, with not having enough staff, with not having enough beds, and not being able to have the care that most people need. Next slide. So I just wanted to go through the difference, the major or main right now options in care. So we know that there's long-term care, which is nursing home. We know that there's retirement homes, and we know that there's aging in place, which is aging in your own home with bringing in support services and maybe family, neighbors, and community helping out as well. So right now, for private accommodation, the median cost, and this is a Toronto number, is $27.69 for the monthly payment to an annual payment of about $33,000, and that's co-funded by the government. So they pay half, and your half is $33,000. With a retirement home, it's in a way like a private senior condo. It doesn't fall under the Long-Term Health Care Act. A private room, the median, is around $3,500. I'd have to be honest and say I've yet to come across a retirement home within Mississauga, Peel, and Toronto that the cost is around $3,500. It usually tends to be in the number we approximated at is about $5,000 a month. So that would be about 40, yes?
Just quickly, what year are those rates?
Oh, sorry, these rates are from 2021. So recent.
They've gone up.
Correct, yes, they have. That's the one thing we can say. We know we've heard tons and tons about inflation, especially food inflation. Healthcare has been inflated for decades and decades. This is the retirement home, and then this is living at home with private PSW care, and that's for a 24-hour day if that was the option that you selected. And obviously we see that when we look at a number like this, it is horrifying. It is extremely expensive. It is choice and ability. One of the things that causes me concern is we constantly hear of surveys that 80%, 90%, 95% of seniors surveyed want to live in age at home. And I agree with that. I say to my daughter that that's where I want to be as well. And that is doable as long as the supports are in place, as long as the budgeting is in place, as long as the environment's safe, and things don't become medically complex. But it's really starting to think of when things do start to happen and multiple things start to happen and it's not a safe environment, what is the next step? What is the option? And who have you discussed it with? So what we run across a lot with our families that we deal with is they'll tell us the plan because we're not necessarily emotionally involved with them. We're not the son or daughter looking at mom and dad talking about how things are going to be and what does end of life look like. So sometimes clients find it easier to talk to us about what their plan is than actually even having the conversations with their children, because the children get upset or they themselves get upset and they don't want to have this conversation, and it's like an elephant in the room. So what we try to do is with our elderly clients, help facilitate that conversation, and with the adult children, you have to ask, because I'll tell you, I have been on the end of receiving phone calls at 3 in the morning, my mom bawling saying, your father's had a heart attack, can you come? And it is the worst feeling if you do not know what your parent wants. So the criterion to get into long-term care. So the criterion itself that was posted on the Ministry of Health website. It's really quite simple. You just need to be 18 years or older, have a valid OPIP card, and need to have a care need that cannot be met at home or within the community. This is where it gets tricky, because this is resource-based. What community has enough resources to be able to provide the care that people need? So I guess I would open this up now to the audience. Who has either been a caregiver or had to facilitate care for somebody around them? Mom, dad, brothers, sisters? Was it an easy job or was it a difficult job navigating the system? Horrid. Okay, so the word that I hear a lot is horrid. Yes, it is. It's a maze. Nothing is very clear cut. And what we're seeing happening now, because there's a shortage of beds, the criteria is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. When I started in long-term care, and that would have been about 28 years ago, the criterion at that point, so I worked in, which would now be Extendicare. The lodge itself was called Central Park Lodge. The criterion to get into the nursing home when I worked in the nursing home was all you needed was to have one ADL, so one activity of daily living, that you needed assistance with. Your name would go on, and within about a week to maybe 14 days at a stretch, you'd actually get a bed. Okay? That does not exist now. That has not existed for at least 28 years. Next slide. So we hear commonly about ADLs, and the criterion is not being one of the bigger set of criterions is not being able to do an activity of daily living. So that's taking care of your body, that's dressing, that's taking yourself safely to the washroom, transferring. So that's whether it's a toilet or the bed, a bed to the kitchen, getting in and out safely of a seat. And eating. Are you able to prepare food for yourself, and are you able to feed yourself? So the process for people who have not gone through it, what happens is you identify that there's a need that you're unable to take care of on your own. You end up calling Home and Community Care Support Services, which is the old CCAC, the old WIN. They send somebody into your home to assess the need, and they have a bunch of questions. They assess the environment, they assess the need. Based on that, the person's name goes on a list, and the list has to do with how immediate is the need. If it's still doable, manageable at home, even if it's at the cost of adult child saying, I can't do this anymore, you're still not considered crisis and put high on the waiting list for a long-term care bed. You can apply to 5 different homes. Once a bed becomes available at any home, you have once they let you know that the bed's available, you have 24 hours to accept that bed. If you do not accept that bed because it wasn't the first choice, it was number 5, if you say no, your name comes off the list, the file is closed, and then 12 weeks, so 3 months later, you can reapply again. The only thing that changes this is if there's a sudden change in your condition, or if you're married, if something happens with the spouse, then that raises you up to crisis. Next slide. So who gets priority? So applicants who are considered high care needs that can't be resolved in the community, they're placed first. So here would be an example of what we've seen recently. There was a client who was diagnosed with dementia. The son and daughter who are our clients are taking care of them at home. They were told that they could not get mom and dad close enough on the waiting list because what takes priority is a couple who has been separated from each other, where one of the other couples now needs care. So there is a ranking of how to get into sort of the top 10% of bed availability. Currently in Ontario, the wait list is 38,000 people long. So the interesting number with this is pre-COVID, the wait list in Ontario to get a long-term care bed was 33,000. What happened with COVID, and I find this very interesting, is obviously when we heard that 80% of the deaths happened in long-term care facilities, there was a mass outcry that there's no way that we would want to age in a long-term care facility, or that we'd offer this up as a solution for mom and dad. But the number has gone up, and this has to do with, it's all well and good to say we're gonna age in place, but you can age in place only if you have the care that you need. So this has become, the dichotomy between aging in place, yes?
I just want to mention the first bullet, I think it's important to know that that also includes hospital patients, because
Correct.
they'll be on crisis and they can help anybody in the community.
Correct, so if you're in the hospital and they need the bed, and that goes into Rule 7, you can be considered crisis if they need the bed. If the hospital is closing down, you will become within the top 10% for bed admission. Next slide. So this is something we deal a lot with our clients. Our clients will come to us and say they're looking possibly to sell their home, that they would like to look at retirement living. And when my mom was requiring extra care, I looked at retirement homes in Mississauga. So I'm from Mississauga. And what impressed me about the retirement homes were you'd walk in and would have an awesome feel, sort of like a resort, a hotel, that would look pretty, it was like, oh, Mom, this is gonna be awesome. She's like, you staying? Okay. Next one. So it's important to know, what does the lobby actually cost? So this is actually from a home in Mississauga, and it's a very large home. And what I noticed when they gave me the list, here it was like a menu of options. So really it was the definition of what do you need or what do you think is important. So when I even looked at, care for my mom and stuff like that, so she would need daily assistance because her hands didn't work well. So that would be $500 a month, so that's an extra $6,000 a year. Mom was very big on bathing, so a bath every day would be $40 extra. Because she was not able to ambulate well, she wore a Medipad of brief, so she would need constant brief changing. That's at this home, at this retirement home, that was an extra $600 a month. And some of the other things that were on this special homes menu. So when I looked at this, I always keep this, and these are, again, prices that are from 2019. I always keep this on. Oh, sorry. I always keep this on. It's not. Oh, it died. Oh, great. Oh, does that mean I'm talking too much? I'll speed it up.
This one.
Much better.
So with our clients, I always keep that as a list, just so we can start to plan, because the reality is, shocking as this is, it is one of the choices that we have, and most people say the word, I want to go to a retirement home, without understanding what they need to start budgeting for. Next slide. So methods of funding retirement and healthcare. Obviously, we are all aware OHIP pays for a portion, and we have CPP and OAS. And if you're lower income, possibly GIS, which is Guaranteed Income Supplement. Company pensions, personal savings, insurance. This is what we're seeing a lot of now, family, friends, and community. That there's, yes?
An earlier slide, I think you had, it was a 50-50 split. This is just a general comment on who was paying what in the whole.
Oh, okay. That number that I had, that's what I would pay personally, and the government would pay the other half. So I would pay about $33,000, and the government would pay about $33,000.
Okay, so a parent,
Yes.
they have, if they work, they have, if they didn't, they have OAS. If they did, they have CPP, or the husband did, or the wife
Yes.
did, right? And maybe even a private pension. So does the government, and the numbers was around $3,000 or $3,000 a month, roughly 27 to 33. So I'm just trying to determine whether, when I'm looking at this, so are they just, is that the full cost that you have on that previous slide, and is government funding 50% of that, and then the family's members' income or the family is funding the other 50%?
Correct. So remember, that number that I showed was for a private room. So that means I would be in a room all to myself. So lesser would be a semi-private room, and then a ward. So a ward now is either 4 or 3 people. They changed the definition of ward during COVID because of having to isolate spacing. But yeah, so what would happen is you get into a long-term care facility. It's not means assessed. So they're not gonna say, hey, show me your mom or dad's notice of assessment. It's based on need. If you can't afford the client portion, you can actually apply for a reduction. The application has to be done yearly.
Oh, no, a family member looks after that for her, and
Yeah.
I just never realized it seems, well, I mean, I'm sure other people are in more difficult situations, but it seemed very reasonable to me, because I see the pricings when I go to visit her, right? About
Yes.
$3,000 a month, give or take,
Yes.
and it's quite good care.
And that's in long-term care, and that's why the list is so much longer. It is the affordable option. Yes.
The affordable, so what would be the expensive option?
The expensive option would be possibly retirement home, depending where you are, and even more, depending on your level of care need, would be aging in place, would be bringing the care in. So, yes?
Hi. The cost for the long-term care.
Speak up, please.
Sorry?
You just speak up.
The cost for the long-term care, are there any extra costs involved around that, or does that cover?
That covers the
Okay.
main stuff, so that covers your room, your food, your care, however, there's ancillary services. So if you needed foot care, if you needed,
Haircuts.
yeah, haircuts, outings, stuff like that, that's an extra expense. But the majority of your care is covered through what you're paying and the copay that the government pays.
And the drug and your meds are paid through that? Your
The-
meds?
So it operates the same way, whatever OHIP covers, whether you're in your home or in a facility, OHIP will still cover. If there's specialized drugs that you don't want the generic version, or there is no generic version, and OHIP doesn't cover it, that is still out of pocket.
And the incontinence products, are they in that?
In a nursing home, the briefs are covered. In a retirement home, it is an extra pay. So you either bring it in for mom or dad or whoever, or you can, use that as part of your plan in the retirement home, say you want to use whoever their supplier is.
Thank you.
So bang on, so TV, I have a husband who's in long-term care 2 years now. So things like cortisone shots for the knee, that is not covered by OHIP, and if you don't have a plan, you have to pay unless you're 68, 65 years of age and older, right? So all those auxiliary costs add up, television, telephone, all those haircuts, add up to easy peasy, another $200 to $300 a month.
So, and it's just gonna, yeah, so it's just gonna actually comment, so within long-term care, so you pay half, the government pays half. The ancillary costs usually end up to be annually between $3,000 to $4,000 extra dollars, depending on the stuff that you want to happen. So, you know, there's sometimes, when I worked in long-term care, there were bus outings, there were special dinners, there was the hairdresser, there was the tuck mark, sort of tuck with all that. So it all depends on that, but the majority of your support is covered through your peer and the government. Yes?
I'll just add this one comment and then I'll shut up.
Can you speak up? Can you speak up?
We assume that long-term care is just for the aged. Where my husband is located, there's a 30-year-old. There's a 30-year-old who had a stroke and the mother could not care for him. So all those things that, we assume that it's just age-related is not. There's 40-year-olds. So I guess the point is, it could happen to anyone at any time for any reason. So my husband's only 68, so he's considered a junior senior. And yet there's an individual who's 30, and there's a woman who's 40, and it just gives you pause for thought that it could happen, really, to anyone.
And I think that's exactly the point. It's not just aging, it's the idea of having conversations and being prepared, because crisis can happen at any point. While we're waiting for the next slide, what I'd like to comment on, case number 1 and case number 2, that was my dad and that was my mom. And I took care of them for 10 years inside the home before it became too medically complex that I could not. Just so you know, it is real. We have 2, so first, second, and third. First,
Question regarding the dementia patients in locked wards.
Yes.
There are some patients some people,
yes,
that are in the nursing home
Or the retirement home?
and they have dementia.
Yes.
Use that.
That's a lot. So where do you stand on that situation? Say you know, you have someone who is, I know people whose family member has dementia, they wander, they get lost, you always see the ads in Burlington, news, and the only way that they ever got them in was violence. As soon as they become violent, then they get in, but other than that, you're on the creek.
Yeah, so this is both a personal comment and what we see, and for a lot of the white papers and conferences I go to. The growing problem right now ends up being, when somebody's diagnosed with dementia, obviously there's, you know, by the time you're around third, fourth, or fifth stage dementia. Dementia itself, so Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. There's 7 major types of dementia. Dementia itself tends to be diagnosed when you're in stage 2. So you already have it, you're in stage 2, and some things start happening where now people become a bit concerned about your safety or what's happening. By the time that happens and you try to get into a facility, the issue that's happening right now is there's not enough specialized care and not enough specialized beds for people who have been diagnosed with dementia. And you're correct, that the person itself has to, if they're in a home or an apartment or a condo on their own, and they become a crisis, they become a risk to themselves physically, they go up the list on crisis. If there's a person with dementia who's living at home with their son or daughter, brother, sister, or husband, they aren't at crisis yet because there is somebody to stop, but it is an actual issue. There's not enough beds. You're seeing a lot of retirement homes now offering dementia or memory care units, and that's for people with dementia. So you're seeing a bit of a sliding scale for what was formerly offered at long-term care facilities, now being offered in some form in retirement homes. Yeah, it is a problem. The best I can tell you, it is a problem, and right now we're having a really big problem addressing the funding to build the homes necessary for the beds to help put people in a supportive, non-constrictive environment, which means a lot before that. Sorry, yourself, sir.
You mentioned case 1 and case 2 with $75.5 million, and your experience was with that. Were any of those costs considered medical expenses that you could submit to CRA?
Yes, a small portion.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry.
You can't hear anything.
Small portion?
Yeah, the question was, for case number 1 and case number 2, case number 1 was $176,000 out of pocket, case number 2 was just under $500,000. How much of that was considered usable on a tax return as medical expense? A very small portion was.
Small, like 10%, 20%?
It ended up being probably about 12.8%. Sorry.
A number of times you have mentioned the words, the government will do, the government will pay. Other than CARP, are there methods that seniors can use to make apparent to the government that we are a very viable, growing block of electors? And I have met so many seniors who will vote. I've always voted progressive and conservative, and I'll do that till I die. And here we are. The value system of our society is that more is better. So these companies want to make more profit. We want to elect us. We'll keep your taxes low. Well, your taxes are paying for this. And are we not authors of our problems ultimately?
Absolutely, that is a very good point. So the point was, everybody in this room, and me included, so I'll be considered a senior in 2 years. So I am part of the number that I'm going to be talking about. My daughter will be one of the younger generation that will be trying to direct, hopefully, what's happening right now. But this is a big problem. Like, when we think about what should the government be listening to, who should they be listening to for what's best for them? Where's the gap? Where's the risk? It should be everybody in this room and everybody like you who's not in this room. But as you rightly pointed out, there's two issues happening right now. Funding is such a major problem, and I have a slide that I'll go through. There's actually a shortfall. The report came out in March. There's going to be a huge shortfall in 2027-28. And there's no method right now for funding the shortfall because the tax base is shrinking.
I have many friends in the East Coast, Nova Scotia. Is it different? They seem to get their, somebody comes into their house 4 hours a day, 2 to 3 times, different agencies.
So Ontario right now is suffering the most because it has the highest or the densest population. Yeah, so even in Ontario, smaller communities tend to not be experiencing the same problem as Toronto, Mississauga, Oakville, the larger cities, because the population isn't as dense and not as much need. So the way the pooling works outside of need, put aside need and what services you need to come in. Here's the pot that's given, pretend, to my area in Mississauga. Here's the pool of hours. Here's the amount of people that need to take from that pool of hours. Now we need to rank those people with what can this pool do. So in less population dense areas, the care tends to be better and they don't have as much complaints. Here would be an example. I have a client, her dad, he was diagnosed with dementia. He's living on his own in a home. CCAC, she called CCAC because he was having issues bathing himself. He slipped in the tub, but he did not fall hard enough to cause a situation where there was blood. Blood you get looked at right away, but he had a blood bruise, so he hit his head. Her response to me, and she called crying, and I was like, she said to me that the response from CCAC when she said, "Dad needs more help," was tell him to sponge bath his genitals at the sink. And she burst out crying, and all I thought was, if all of these things were written down and submitted as a white paper, would it make a difference? If this was somebody else's mom or dad, would this be said? So that this is a problem, and it's the reason why, like, part of what I feel is my job as a result of mom and dad and what I went through. It was a horrible decade. It was tough. It was the toughest job I've ever had to do in my life. Is to make sure that people start having these conversations with everyone around them, so that there's support, there's empathy, and there's just the knowledge of what sort of plan should we be putting in place. What happens on death? Sorry, I think I'm getting sidetracked. Miriam had mentioned to me that in last month's presentation that a question came up about what happens to a TFSA when somebody dies. So I just wanted to quickly clear that up. So for anyone who doesn't know what a TFSA is, it's a tax-free savings account. It's a registered account. Okay? It can hold anything in it, just like your RSP or your RIF. When you die, what happens is, let's say it's $100,000 and you die, it's $100,000. That goes tax-free to a beneficiary. If there's a lag between the date of death and when it's transferred to the beneficiary, so let's say in the example it was $100,000 on date of death and it was $110,000 by the time the beneficiary received it, that $10,000 above fair market value is taxable to the beneficiary. The only time that does not happen is if the beneficiary is a partner or a spouse. If you're a partner or a spouse, it rolls tax-free to the partner or the spouse, okay? Even if there's a difference between date of death and the rollover date, it rolls over tax-free, okay? Next slide. and that would be called, for any of you that wondered, if you ever see the word successor holder, the only persons that can be a successor holder is a spouse or a common law partner, okay? Yes?
There's two types of TFSA. So one would be sort of income generated through investments. That I can see fine, but if it's straight deposit TFSA, every month you're contributing X amount, I can't see that would be the case.
So I'm just gonna correct, that's a misnomer. There are two different types of TFSA. It's a TFSA, what you do in it is completely up to you. So you can hold simply GICs or Canada T-bills or money market. Okay. Or you can hold stocks, bonds, mutual funds, GICs. So it's a TFSA no matter what you're holding it. Okay, just the growth obviously would be different. If you're holding money market instruments, growth is a bit smaller, especially in the previous 2 decades where interest rates were almost zero. But if you hold other securities, depending what market cycle we're in, yes, it could be a lot larger. So yes, it's just a TFSA, you can hold whatever you want, and you can contribute to it however you want, monthly through a PAC, or make your lump sum contribution every year, this year being $6,500. Next slide. Oh, sorry, big one.
Can anyone be a beneficiary of the
Correct.
TFSA?
Yes, yes. This might, oh, yes, sir.
This may not be perfectly on topic, but I was wondering if you could update, or if you knew what the status of dementia in MAID was. So, like for me, my silent worry is living a long time with dementia. That's I just wondered where that is. I know it doesn't happen yet for dementia, but I just wondered if you knew what that was.
Sir, did you want to comment on that?
Did you want me to, did you know? I have the answer.
Oh, okay, so I'll give my general comment, and then if you have something more specific. Legislation, or further legislation went through this year on St. Patrick's Day of this year, March 17th. It's still a vague area because the issue that they have is unfortunately, when you're deemed to be diagnosed with dementia, rightly or wrongly, there's temporal capacity. So it doesn't mean that right away you don't have capacity. There are moments where everything is fine. There's moments where there's a lot of forgetfulness. But you're deemed to have lost capacity. If you have been deemed to lose capacity, the ability to say that this is something that I want becomes an issue. Sarah?
So for 2022, there was 3,000 maids in Ontario. In case you want to know that.
Yeah, so the one other thing I was going to comment on is part of what came up with the new documents with MAID is dealing with mental health issues, and that hasn't passed yet either. With dementia, it's a bit of a slippery, I shouldn't say slippery slope, it's a gray area. So I can say right now, if this happens, if I got to stage 6 or 7, this is something I would want. However, what happens is you can't decide it ahead of time. When you get a diagnosis that's going to cause long and induced suffering, then it can be something that you can talk about to the doctor, or the doctor has to refer you to someone who can talk to you about it. But saying right now, these are the parameters, no. The best you could do right now is set up advanced healthcare directives, which isn't a legal document, but it's sort of an attachment to your personal power of attorney for personal care, to say these are your wishes, these are your guiding principles. And then when you get a diagnosis that's considered undue suffering, then you can look into it. My guess, just from conversations I've had with medical community and stuff, is I think what they're going to see is that there's more and more of a desire to direct what is it you want, and there might at some point be this whole thing of, hey, if I can say this right now, and this is my life philosophy, why should that moment of diagnosis change my life philosophy?
The same as you can put a DNR in now.
Yeah, so a DNR would help with anything, but that's only for not resuscitating.
Yeah, I realize,
Yeah.
so.
But you mentioned a key point, and I think it.
Can you speak up?
She mentioned a key point. This this gentleman, if you have dementia and you start to decline, then the doctor can, the disability program, I guess, and so if you need extra support, then that becomes sort of a tax, not a write-off, but sort of tax support, because you need extra support because you're demented, you know what I mean? So what is that called, Ontario Disability?
The ODSP,
I guess, ODSP.
you know, so the ODSP more services, disability as a function of income, not a you have diagnosis of dementia. This would be supporting that level of care needed. Yeah.
Right.
So to your question, more to come in March of 2024. There's still a lot of fighting with the do's and don'ts with it. We're further than we were a year ago. But the answer to your question is no. You can't predetermine that. Just like you can't predetermine when I turn 89, let's say 89, I want to be in long-term care because I'm pretty sure, based on my family history, I'm going to need care. You can't predetermine it. It's a needs-based assessment. Oh, sorry. I'll go through this quickly because I think I'm going to start running out of time. Converting an RSP to a RIF. For anyone who's unclear on the rules, the year that you turn 71, the RSP has to be converted to a RIF. All that means it goes from the name of an RSP to the name of a RIF. You can hold anything you want in the RSP. The same assets can be transferred over. The only difference is now, the year after conversion, you start receiving a payment. The payment is a minimum amount that you have to take. With a RIF, you could take any amount that you want. If you take an amount above your minimum, so let's say your minimum is $30,000 a year. If you take $35,000, that $5,000, that's taxable at source, so it's taxable when you withdraw it. Then the following year, you're gonna get a tax slip called a T4 RIF, with everything you took out of your RRIF, and it's taxable income. You can elect to withhold extra tax on a RIF. That way you're not shocked with a tax bill in April. And similar rules follow with converting an RSP to a RIF on who's a beneficiary. If you name your spouse or common law partner as beneficiary, it's a tax-free rollover to them. And the payments can continue under the deceased spouse's year of birth or yours. So you can pick and choose that. However, if you name an adult child as beneficiary, or your estate as beneficiary, let's say your RIF is $200,000, that $200,000 is immediately deemed to be sold the day you die, and it is taken in as taxable income. So whatever the value is on date of death, if it's going to a beneficiary of the estate who's not your spouse, a common law partner, it is taxable fully as income, okay?
By the deceased.
Pardon me, sorry?
The income tax rate as a deceased.
Yes, right.
Can I have one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
When I receive my RIF, annual payment, there is an automatic taxable withdrawal from it. It seems like I cannot take out, if I'm eligible for $20,000, I can't take out $20,000 and have it in hand. I have to have a deduct portion sent to the CRA.
If you take your minimum payment out and your minimum is $20,000, you will receive $20,000 net. If you take anything above it, that is taxed at source. Or if you elect for a blended rate of tax, or for extra tax to be withheld, then you won't get $20,000 net.
Okay, so maybe it's an arrangement I have with
Correct.
the person giving me. I have a portion of it retained for taxes so that I'm not gonna be hit.
Right, so what we see a lot of that our clients do is they elect to take the RIF payments monthly, so it's similar to a cash flow. That way, most people have their expenses based monthly for your house, your home, your groceries and everything. And they usually elect to have a bit of extra tax taken off that way in April. It's not a shock getting a tax bill for the money that you saved all your life and now you're getting paid back. Okay, next slide.
Who determines?
Yes.
Who determines how much you get?
Oh, that's a formula. So what happens is on December 31st, your portfolio is valued. So whatever the value, the closing value is on December 31st, there's a formula, a percent based on your age is applied to that value, and that's how much you get as your minimum. But you can elect anything above your minimum if that's what you want.
Okay. The formula is based on how many years you think you'll live, or
No, it's based on your age.
it's just based on your age?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
We did that, okay, next slide. Who's a qualifying survivor? So I've mentioned this before. Qualifying survivor is your spouse or common law partner. It also can be a dependent infirm child or grandchild, or a financially dependent child or grandchild. Next slide. So this is what I was talking about, where one of my fears are. This report came out in the spring of this year, of 2023, and what the prediction is that for 2027-28, that there's going to be a $21.3 billion healthcare shortfall. Right now, as a result of COVID, 56,000 nursing and PSW left the industry. There's still going to be a shortfall of 33,000 PSWs and nurses for care, and that's care, whether it's private care, hospitals, that's care period, people, bodies. The prediction is that there's going to be less hospital capacity, less long-term care capacity, but similar home care capacity. Of course there will. That's what the reliance is on. In Canada, we spend more than $300 billion annually on healthcare. 13% of our gross domestic product goes to healthcare, and more than 70% is funded through tax revenue. And as I mentioned before, something you guys may have heard on the news or read is that for the first time, and this was probably announced about 6 years ago, for the first time ever, we have less children below the age of 15 than people above the age of 65. If the social programs are based on tax revenue, there you can see what the shortfall is. Next slide. Oh, there. So that's a breakdown of our population, and that's a 2023 stat. So 15 3/4 are below the age of 15. 65, there's about 18 and a half. And right now, the fastest growing segment of our population is centenarians, and more than half the centenarians are women. Next slide. So these are conversations we have with our clients. What happens if the caregivers stop caring? My mom and dad relied on myself to take care of them. There was never a discussion. It was just this is your job, you're our daughter. 8.1 million employed Canadians are caregivers. They provide 70 to 80% of the care in Canada right now, and they're saving the public purse between $24 to $31 billion. So an issue is becoming with the birth rate slowing down a bit and less ability to care, especially because people are more mobile now. So people don't stay necessarily in the city they were brought up in to take jobs. They move around. What happens when there's not enough caregivers? Next slide. So common assumptions. We'll remain healthy forever. I used to think that too. The government will provide for us. We hear this quite a bit, which is part of the reason why people don't plan for healthcare, because they have this idea that the government will take care of them. And it may have been that case in 1964 when OHIP was developed and the premise of OHIP, but it's not that case now. Our money will last forever. Our families will be our caregivers. I'll get into long-term care when I need to. What can derail a retirement plan? We can live too long, so we can outlive our money. We can live too long and well. We can die too soon, and what that means is dying too soon and you didn't put in place a will, and the government becomes your executor. None of us want that. Becoming sick and disabled. Excellent. These are 2021 statistics. 25% of boomers have parents who require financial assistance. 20% of Canada's working baby boomers have nothing saved for retirement. With the growing need right now for care, and we know that filling in the gap for what we need as our care costs, we can see where this is going to be an issue, especially in 2027, 28. Next slide. Emotional hurdles. We all know these ones. Next slide. This is what conversations we deal with a lot. It lacks a sense of urgency or current reality. It's too early to start thinking about it. I'll think about it when I retire. If I notice a change in my condition, I'll still have enough time to plan. The first time my dad had a heart attack was the first day that his health started to decline, and that was at the age of 78. Nothing's going to happen to me, it all happens to the other guy. I'm healthy right now, I don't have to think about it. If I don't think about it, it won't happen to me. We get told that when a lot of my clients. I don't want to think about it because the moment I do, something's going to happen to me tomorrow. It's like you're bringing in bad luck. And, you know, my analogy is, okay, I think all the time about winning the lottery. Does it happen? Loss of independence. This one we can all relate to. I want to make my own decisions and I want to be in control. Lack of self-awareness. This we see quite a bit with dementia. I still think I'm making good decisions, aren't I? Fear, I don't want to think about it or talk about it. Trust, I can't trust somebody else to make those decisions. If you want something done right, do it yourself. Next slide. So, thank you. I want to end on the note that the call to action today is to have that conversations with your sons, your daughters, your brothers, your sisters. Anyone who you feel is going to be part of your support plan. I think it's really important to have this conversation. Oftentimes, clients will ask me, well, Neil, you're saying all this stuff, what have you done? So, I'm 53 years old, I'll be 54 in December. I'm high risk for cancer, I get tested twice a year for breast cancer. My mom was a 5-time cancer survivor, my father had pancreatic cancer. I have the gene for breast cancer. My sister had breast cancer at 43 and my mom had a double mastectomy. So I talk the walk. My daughter is aware that one day I will get a diagnosis. I have set up my power of attorney for care, my power of attorney for property, and I've set up my will, and I've talked to her about what will happen if something should happen to me. It was the worst conversation I've had. I had that conversation with her when she was 13, and her eyes were about this big, and she was weeping uncontrollably. After we got through that conversation, and I asked her, what do you want to ask me? Her mom, if you die, what happens to you? And we went through that. Well, what happens to Dad if you die? And I said, you are going to be the devil's keeper, and you are going to keep anyone away from him for the first year. Let him get through knowing me. But she had questions, and now she's 18, and we talk about death. We talk about the death of her grandma, my mom and dad. We talk about what happens to us, what happens to Dad and I if we were to die. So she's aware of it, and she's now comfortable with it at 18, and I have to have that conversation with her for 2 reasons. One, if I'm encouraging everybody else to do the same thing, I have to do it myself to know it is a hard thing to do. And I also have to do it because this is what I deal with every day, and I need to know I've done right by everyone in saying, have this conversation, please. So thank you. I'll open it up to questions. You have to have one. You have to have a separate, you mean a person or documents?
A person. You can have the same person for both, but it's recommended to have a different person.
Okay, so there's 2 schools of thought. It's recommended not to have the same person, that way there's not a conflict of interest. And presumably the power of attorney for property, we'd be choosing someone who maybe has a bit more financial acumen. The only issue I see with that is, and I've seen this happen with clients before, daughter is power of attorney for care, son is power of attorney for property. Somebody needs the money or the inheritance more. They don't want to release money for the extra care or the extra medication or the extra whatever. So we've seen fighting when that happens because the values are not necessarily aligned. Not a good answer. In my case, I was power of attorney for both care and property, with my sister.
Right.
Sorry, no.
So there are options for health insurance.
Yes.
There are many options.
for health insurance. I just wonder as far as, is there a separate discussion on that one, or leading people towards what to consider, what's important to look at, to cover these huge costs? People do want to care remain.
So the question was about any insurance products that can help take care of this. So there is long-term care insurance. Most providers have actually left Canada. It is expensive to get out, take out, especially later on in life. And it's expensive for them to carry because the trajectory on the payout is like this, right? People don't die the way they used to. We can medically intervene for a very long time. So long-term care insurance would be one, critical illness insurance would be another. You know, you can always convert life policies, a portion of it, into long-term care insurance. So there are different options to help. Unfortunately, I think what happens is, because when insurance is bought, it's usually to cover the estate. Most people are very reluctant to start drawing down on it because they don't want to not leave a legacy to their sons and daughters. We're seeing that a lot as well. People won't use their money to take care of themselves because they want to leave something for their sons and daughters. And I do understand that, but I think we're in a generation now where we really do need to make sure that we are doing the best care we can do for ourselves. And if there's something left, then that goes to brothers, to sons and daughters, or to whoever. So, yes, sir.
Regarding TFSA,
Yes.
I understand that my TFSA will roll to my wife.
Mhm.
If she predeceases me, hers comes to me. Now, am I able, let's say that's the situation, I'm then diagnosed with Parkinson's or dementia, whatever. Can I remove all of my TFSA money and give it to one of my grandchildren and say, here, use this for my benefit?
Yes, yes. So when you have the TFSA, you can, when it's tax-free, so you take out the money, anything can be done with it. You could take it out and gift it to your children, to your grandchild, with the, this is used to take care of me. The one thing I would caution is, nothing prevents them from not taking care of you with the money. I mean, you know, and I don't mean to be glib when I say that.
I was more concerned with the tax implications.
No, you take it out, you're taking it out still in your name, so it's tax-free no matter what's in it or what the growth was.
Yes.
Doesn't matter, you can take it out, here it is, and then that is your cash in your bank account to distribute to whoever you'd like. Yes,
Tax-free to them.
tax-free, correct.
Give them,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you.
different beneficiaries on the TFSA and it distributed that way?
You can put
But
that,
that would prevent having to withdraw it sooner and pay the tax if there's beneficiaries on it.
well, when you withdraw it, there wouldn't be tax, but if you don't, so let's say you put 3 different beneficiaries on your TFSA, one being, let's say the breakdown was 25% to my husband, 25 to my adult children. What would happen is 25% would roll tax-free to your husband. The 75% that's going to child A, B, and C, that will go to the kids tax-free, okay? But if there's a delay, so let's say wherever your TFSA is, they say they need a death certificate, a letter of direction, or something like that, and there's a delay in getting it. If there's any sort of market movement, the beneficiaries, the children, would have to pay tax on whatever the movement was, whatever the difference was.
So somebody's still gonna have to pay a tax one way or another.
It's the least, let's put it this way, it's the least taxable thing that happens outside of life insurance.
Okay.
Yes.
During that delay, should the value go down, is there a capital?
No. CRA. No.
I'm still having difficulty because I have a TFSA, but I am contributing, it's not growing, it's just my contributions every single month, so that is not. Right, so that's not gonna grow
So you're using it like a savings account? It's just, so all that means is if you're using it like a savings account, chances are you're putting it in money market, is what say, okay, let me at least put it in money market or high interest savings, because at least right now, that's yielding about 4%. Cash balances are yielding 0, right? So you wanna do that, but yes, it will just grow very, very, very slightly, it's in cash, but it doesn't matter whether it was cash or sitting in, BCE shares, it makes no difference. When you take it out, it's not taxable. Doesn't matter what you
No, I know that, but we were talking about the spouse, you can roll it over if they don't get it, but in this case, it would be my daughter.
Right, so.
Right, so you're saying that in that scenario, you'd be doing.
No, so in that scenario, let's say you died tomorrow and the value was $100,000, right? If she gets it in her hand and it's still the same value, $100,000, there's no tax payable because it's non-taxable. If by the time it's rolled over to her, it's $101,000, that difference from your date of death to the date she gets it, that's taxable. So that $1,000 would be taxable in her hands.
But it's not forgivable.
No, as long as you put a beneficiary, correct.
So
The firehouse is
there won't be any delay.
Oh, yes,
On the subject of,
yes,
if you have multiple investments
yes,
within your portfolio,
yes.
and it has to move over to a RIF, what happens to investments that are invested for a time period that don't mature for 2 or 3 years within that RIF?
So like a GIC, or,
Yes.
or doesn't matter, what happens is, whatever's sitting in your RSP, whether it is liquid, so trades on the market, or it's a term deposit, that's 2 years out to maturity, it rolls over into the RIF as is, and the maturity just continues on. So nothing changes, nothing has to be sold, it just transfers from the RRSP to the RRIF or the RIF.
Okay, so in the first year,
Yes,
if you have to take out a percentage,
yes.
what if there's a penalty for?
Redeem?
Yes, does that fall into that?
So the question was, let's say the assets are rolled from an RSP to a RIF, but the RIF has is filled with assets that have maturity. So let's say it's a ladder GIC portfolio. One of two things happen. It is a government mandate that minimum RIF payment has to happen 1 year after the plan's rolled over into a RIF. So you would either say, okay, is there anything else in the RSP that when it rolls over to the RIF, that we can sell to generate the money for the RIF payment? What tends to happen is 1 year to 2 years before you have to convert, wherever you are, they'll notify you that in 2 years or whatever the timeline is, this plan has to be converted. They'll make sure that the liquidity is there for your first year payment. If it's in a GIC, I can honestly say I don't know because we've never structured plans where clients are locked in. I can find out for you what happens if it's ladder GICs and the first maturity happens after you have to take your payment. I can find that out for you.
Okay.
We've never done that actually, so.
The decisions are made by the bank, right?
Depends, if it's a self-directed, so the question was, are the decisions made by the bank? The minimum payment is not a decision made by the bank, that's mandated by a formula. What's sold to generate the payment, if it's a self-directed plan, you make that decision. You say, I'm gonna sell BC shares, whatever. If it's the bank's gonna have to call you to say, we need to sell something, what would you like us to sell? Okay?
Okay, so you direct the bank,
You direct the bank.
but they're the controllers of the plan.
Yes, because they would have they would be the trustee on the plan, but because it's an annuity plan, so you're the name on it, you're the client, you would be the one calling them to say, okay, my first year's payment is $50,000, you can sell X, Y, Z to generate it, or they'll call you to say, we need to generate money, what would you like us to sell? Or you do it online if you're online.
And they're responsible for issuing the T4 RIF.
Correct, yes, yes.
You could also say, assets of the common.
Correct. So the comment was, if you didn't need the RIF payment as cash, You can also take the asset out in kind, yes. So if your payment was gonna be $10,000 for year one, if you had a position worth $10,000, you can say, okay, transfer out 95 shares of Loblaws as is, and that can constitute your repayment. And it can go into an investment account, or you can actually contribute it back to your TFSA. That's one strategy.
One last question. When you have an RSP and you're converting it to a RIF, does it still make money?
Yes, spare parts, right. Depends what you're invested in.
Okay.
So nothing changes with the investments, just the type of plan changes. It's an income vehicle, it's an income account, so you're forced to take a payment. But it doesn't mean that anything that was working, you're forced to sell. It just means something in that account has to be sold to generate the money for your first year's repayment and ongoing repayments. But yes, because you can hold anything that you held in your RSP, it's just a rollover in kind. It continues on. So if you're making money in your RSP, you should be making money in your RIF, depending on the market, minus whatever your RIF payment is.
And you should probably structure as you come close to your age,
Correct?
your GICs or whatever,
Yes.
so that you know you have to liquidate.
So the comment is you should probably structure your plan so that there is stuff that's liquid, that's available as you need the money. So what we tend to do for clients, depending on age and stage, especially because interest rates now on money market, depending on the type of account, we're getting anywhere from 4 to 5%. We usually now keep 3 to 5 year RIF wedge, so that's the RIF payments kept as cash. That way, if anything happens to the market goes down because trade war, because of prices of oil, because of interest rates and inflation still going like this, you're not forced to sell assets in a down market. You have the time to recover. Since most recessions last less than 5 years, we're keeping between 3 to 5 years as cash within portfolios now, just for peace of mind. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Neela. There's a pile of information there. And we started the presentation about the silent worry, so I can say that it's probably not that silent anymore, but there is still worry. But I guess everyone's message is to plan, to talk, to have conversations, to face reality. Anything else?
You said it all right there. Face reality. It is an uncertain reality, but you know what? It feels better as you have a conversation.
Becomes less scary when you start talking about it and bringing it on the table. So please do take the action that you need to do to avoid crisis. And it's something in my real estate business that I'm always saying, it's better to be prepared, at least to know what lies ahead, to understand what your options are, to make informed decisions, to let your family know what you're thinking, and make the best of things. Because things do happen in a blink of an eye, and we all, I'm sure, have experienced that. I just wanted again to remind you before you head out, if you haven't talked to them already, please do stop and talk to our educational partners. They're here sitting in the back. They're a little bit lonely. They would love to have some company, some conversations. They'd love to hear about what you're up to and what they'd like to share what you're up to. Again, they don't bite. And having said that, one of our educational partners isn't here today, but what they're offering are some e-books. So there's some QR codes on the slides and some links here. So one of the e-books is Care Planning Workbook, and the other is about if you are now an estate trustee, what to do. So you can download their books complimentary.
Would you be able to email that to the participants?
Absolutely, I'll send that out in the recording. And also, just so you know, on the website, for Empowered Senior Speaker Series website, there's a section there called Reports. So anything that's handed out or any additional information that's provided by the educational partners is all posted there. So it's a big, huge resource library that's available for you, so make use of it. The session has been taped, and we will send you a recording, so you can refer to that, and it will also be posted on the website. If you'd like any of the contact information, if you'd like to register for the next session, please do. If you want to do so here, you can see Ida or Lisa. They can help you with that. Our next session is Wednesday, August the 9th. So this month we were talking about finances. Next month we're going to be talking a little bit more about healthcare. So you asked the question about me. So the presenter is Carla Hickey. She's with a company called Advanced Care Emergency Planning. So she was an ICU nurse and found that far too often her patients were making plans and decisions at the deathbed. So she's going to be speaking about what types of things you can do in terms of power of attorney, in terms of your DNR and your last wishes, all of those things, and just generally medical planning. So it'll be a great session. Please do fill out the survey that you've got there. We really appreciate your feedback. These sessions are for you, and so we really would like to have topics and content that's of value to you, and we would appreciate how we can make them as best as they can be. Pardon me?
We'll take them.
Okay. So, thank you very much.